Most people who fast think they are doing it correctly. A 2022 survey published in the journal Obesity found that 77% of people practicing some form of fasting reported they were satisfied with their approach and saw no reason to change it. But here is the thing. When researchers actually measured metabolic outcomes across those same participants, fewer than 31% were achieving the cellular and hormonal changes they believed they were getting. Today, I am breaking down the exact biological numbers behind extended fasting and intermittent fasting, and which one is actually doing more inside your body. The number you hear most often in fasting conversations is 16 hours. 16 hours fasted, 8 hours eating. The 16,008 method. It is on every fitness blog, every nutrition podcast, every beginner fasting guide published in the last 5 years. And that number is not wrong. But it is incomplete. Because the way most people practice 16-8, they are spending roughly the first 10 to 12 hours of that fast simply burning through the glucose and glycogen stored in their liver and muscles. According to research published in Cell Metabolism in 2019, liver glycogen stores in an average adult are depleted after approximately 10 to 14 hours of fasting, depending on activity level and meal composition. That means the average person doing a standard 16-8 fast may only be spending 2 to 6 hours in a state where the body is actually forced to shift meaningfully into fat oxidation and early cellular repair. 2 to 6 hours. Not 16. If you have been doing 16-8 and wondering why the results feel slower than expected, that is the gap nobody explains to you. And it does not mean 16-8 is not working. It means the story does not end there. The first meaningful threshold in fasting research is around 18 to 20 hours of continuous fasting. At this point, for most adults, glycogen stores are fully depleted. The body has made the full metabolic switch to fat as its primary fuel source. Blood ketone levels begin rising measurably. And a process called autophagy, your body's cellular cleaning mechanism, begins activating more significantly. Picture someone doing what researchers call OMAD, one meal a day. They eat once, usually in the early evening, and fast for the remaining 20 to 23 hours. They are not particularly extreme about health. They simply found that eating once a day made their day simpler. Their mental clarity in the morning feels sharper than it ever did when they ate breakfast. That person probably does not think of themselves as a serious faster. They think of it as just skipping meals. But according to a 2020 study in the New England Journal of Medicine, fasting periods in the 18 to 24-hour range produce significantly greater increases in BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, compared to shorter fasting windows. BDNF is associated with cognitive function, mood regulation, and neurological resilience. They stumbled into a biological threshold without knowing it existed. But does fasting for 18 to 20 hours make you as healthy as you can be through fasting alone? That question has a more complicated answer than most people expect. The next threshold sits at 24 to 48 hours. This is where extended fasting begins. At 24 hours, autophagy is measurably active across multiple tissue types. A 2016 study by Dr. Yoshinori Osumi, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology for his work on autophagy, established that cellular self-cleaning processes accelerate substantially as fasting duration increases beyond the one-day mark. The body is not just burning fat. It is breaking down and recycling damaged proteins, clearing cellular debris, and initiating repair sequences that simply cannot happen in the presence of continuous food intake. At 36 to 48 hours, human growth hormone levels spike dramatically. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that growth hormone output increased by as much as 300% during a 2-day fast compared to baseline. Growth hormone is critical for fat metabolism, muscle preservation, and tissue repair. A 2018 study examining participants during Ramadan found that participants in Pakistan and Turkey showed measurable improvements in lipid profiles, blood pressure, and inflammatory markers after just 2 weeks, even though their daily fasting windows were shorter than many Western protocols. Context, meal composition, and consistency mattered as much as duration. And yet, even at 48 hours of extended fasting, people are still primarily trading time without food. They are performing an intervention. And an intervention, no matter how powerful, is not the same as a sustainable practice. Is the duration of the fast even the right question to be asking? Stop here for a moment. Because what comes next is the part that most fasting content completely avoids. Every article frames the question as a competition. Extended fasting versus intermittent fasting, which wins, which burns more fat. But the biology does not see it that way. There is a layer underneath the duration numbers that determines whether any fasting protocol actually works for you specifically, and it has nothing to do with how long you fast. Stay with this. The real variable is metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch efficiently between burning glucose and burning fat. It is not a fixed trait. It is a trained capacity. And without it, neither extended fasting nor intermittent fasting will deliver the results the research describes. According to data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, published in 2022, approximately 88% of American adults show some degree of metabolic inflexibility. Their mitochondria are not efficient fat burners. Their insulin sensitivity is blunted. When they fast, instead of sliding smoothly into fat oxidation after glycogen depletion, they get stuck in metabolic limbo. Hunger spikes. Cortisol rises. Energy crashes. They break the fast, not because of willpower failure, but because their cells are not yet equipped to handle the transition. This is the core insight most fasting comparisons miss. A 2021 paper in Cell Reports Medicine showed that individuals with higher baseline metabolic flexibility entered measurable ketosis an average of 4 hours earlier during a 48-hour fast. Across a 48-hour window, that represents a nearly 20% difference in the total time spent in the most biologically active fasting state. Think about 2 people. One is a 44-year-old woman who has been doing 16.8 consistently for 8 months. Her body has adapted. Her insulin levels have normalized. When she attempts a 48-hour extended fast, her body handles it with relatively little stress. She enters ketosis early. Autophagy activates fully. The second is a 38-year-old man who decides to start with a 3-day extended fast based on something he read online. No prior fasting experience. Standard Western diet until the day before. His body fights the transition. Cortisol climbs. His muscles begin breaking down protein for fuel before fat oxidation gets established. He loses weight, but a significant portion is lean tissue and water, not the fat and cellular debris the research makes fasting famous for clearing. Health is built in layers over time, not seized in a single dramatic intervention. In populations around the world where fasting has been practiced for generations, not as a trend, but as a cultural rhythm, researchers consistently find long-term metabolic stability, lower rates of age-related metabolic decline, and better preservation of lean muscle mass in older age. A 2023 review in the journal Aging Cell examined communities in Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, and the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. None of these communities practice structured extended fasting protocols. All share one common pattern: long natural gaps between meals, consistent eating windows that align with daylight hours, and very low rates of late-night eating. The study concluded that circadian alignment, eating in sync with your body's internal clock, produced metabolic outcomes comparable to deliberate 16 to 18-hour intermittent fasting, even when total daily fasting duration was sometimes shorter. The biology does not care about the label you put on your eating pattern. It responds to the rhythm you create. And yet, even knowing all of this, most people still feel like they are not doing enough. They read about a 48-hour fast and think they should be doing that. They see a study on autophagy and feel like their fasting window is not long enough to trigger it properly. Researchers call this the comparison cascade. You are not measuring your progress against your own baseline. You are measuring it against the most dramatic result you have ever read about. Think about someone who has been consistently doing 14-10 fasting for 6 months. Their blood sugar has stabilized. Their energy is more consistent. They sleep better. Their inflammatory markers have improved. By any clinical measure, they are doing well. But they read about a 72-hour water fast and feel like they are barely trying. The feeling of not doing enough is not a reliable signal about your actual biological progress. It is a reliable signal about what you have been consuming online. Your body responds to what you consistently do, not to what you occasionally attempt. Extended fasting and intermittent fasting are not competitors. They are different tools in the same kit. The right tool depends entirely on where you are starting from. Intermittent fasting, specifically windows of 16 to 20 hours, is the foundation. It builds metabolic flexibility. It trains your body's fuel-switching machinery. It normalizes insulin sensitivity. It creates the conditions inside which your cells become capable of doing the deeper repair work. This is not the beginner option you graduate out of. This is the practice that makes everything else work. Extended fasting, 24 hours and beyond, is the amplifier. When your metabolism is already trained, an extended fast accelerates cellular repair, deepens autophagy, and produces the hormonal spikes that shorter fasting windows cannot fully reach. The 2021 Cell Reports Medicine study showed that individuals who had practiced consistent intermittent fasting for at least 6 months prior to their first extended fast produced autophagy markers nearly twice as high as those attempting extended fasting without prior experience, twice as high, from the same duration of fast. The difference was entirely in what they had built before they attempted it. There is also a safety dimension worth stating clearly. Extended fasting beyond 24 hours is not appropriate for everyone. People with a history of eating disorders, those on certain medications, individuals who are pregnant or breastfeeding, and anyone with a diagnosed metabolic condition should not attempt extended fasting without direct medical supervision. The hormonal and electrolyte shifts that make extended fasting powerful are the same shifts that can create serious risk in the wrong context. Shorter, consistent fasting is safer, more sustainable, and produces the majority of the health benefits that make fasting worth talking about in the first place. Here is what most people get wrong at a practical level when they compare these two approaches. They measure by the scale. Weight loss is one of the most misleading metrics in fasting research because it responds to both the right changes and the wrong ones. When you lose weight during an extended fast, you are losing a combination of water, glycogen, fat, and, if the conditions are not right, lean muscle tissue. The composition of that loss matters enormously, and the scale cannot tell you what you actually lost. Intermittent fasting, practiced consistently over months, tends to produce slower but compositionally cleaner results. A 2020 meta-analysis in Obesity Reviews, examining 14 randomized controlled trials on time-restricted eating, found that consistent daily fasting windows produced greater preservation of lean mass compared to equivalent caloric restriction without fasting. Your muscle stays. Your fat goes. The process is slower. The outcome is better. The question is not which approach produces a bigger number on the scale in 2 weeks. The question is what your body composition and metabolic health look like in 2 years. That framing completely changes the comparison. There is one more dimension that almost never appears in these comparisons: the psychological one. Intermittent fasting, practiced gradually and consistently, tends to recalibrate hunger in a way that feels increasingly natural over time. According to research from the Salk Institute, published in 2020, ghrelin secretion adapts to your established eating pattern within 1 to 3 weeks of consistent behavior. Your body stops sending the hunger signal because it has learned it will not get a response. Extended fasting does not produce this recalibration in the same way. A 2023 paper in Appetite found that approximately 34% of study participants consumed significantly more calories in the 48 hours following an extended fast compared to their normal intake, effectively erasing a meaningful portion of the caloric deficit created during the fast. The person who has been doing structured 16-8 or 18-6 fasting for 8 months has a different relationship with hunger than they did at the start. They know what real hunger feels like versus habitual hunger. They have built the psychological infrastructure that makes extended fasting, when they eventually try it, far less destabilizing. So here is where every open thread closes. Extended fasting is not better than intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not a lesser version of extended fasting. They are sequential. One builds the conditions for the other to work. Skipping the foundation does not get you to the results faster. It gets you to a harder version of the same result with a higher risk of setback. The body responds to consistency over time more powerfully than it responds to intensity in the short term. The one thing that will actually move your outcomes is this. Pick a fasting window you can sustain every single day for the next 90 days without it feeling like a performance. Not the most impressive window. The most sustainable one. 14 hours. 16 hours. Whatever you can do consistently without building resentment around it. Do that. Let your metabolism adapt. Let your hunger signals recalibrate. Build the foundation. And then, once that feels effortless, once you stop counting the hours because the pattern has become your normal, ask yourself what extended fasting could actually add on top of what you have already built. Because the real question is not which is better. The real question is, what is your body actually ready for right now?